It's good to be here, allowing all the awareness that we have to reveal itself to be one with the divine nature, and reveal divine nature to be one with human nature. Heaven and earth truly are one. Mankind has long forgotten this, but as it comes back into remembrance, there's an opportunity for a blessing to be released, and that all the co-creators can release their divine power through the human forms. We're here ultimately so that all are free. Because until all are free, none are free. The world is therefore primed and ready after thousands of years for a mass awakening. And we have this awareness deep down that something's going to change. But for that something to change means that the full communication between heaven and earth needs to be revealed. And the subconscious patterns need to be dissipated. And the ability to stand in the midst of all the different turmoil, all the different things that go on in each day. And there is the responsibility of standing on the sea of glass mingled in fire. There's almost no point getting caught up in any of the things. There are certain things that we're each given to do in the moment, in the day. But once we get past the day, it all starts to be imagination. What might happen tomorrow? What might have happened yesterday? Everything past that is further and deeper imagination. We're living in a world where people are caught in imaginary ideas, fears and shames and guilts, fears of what tomorrow will bring, shames of what yesterday brought, and therefore not living right here, in the one place at the heart of creation where all things can occur. When one master is staying here, being so present in all the circumstances, that when the mind starts to spin out of control, when it starts to want to talk with that internal talking bit, the inner chatter, when one can gain mastery over the inner chatter so the inner chatter even stops, because one doesn't pay attention to the inner chatter, then the mind starts to become tranquil. Tranquility is the way to further enhance and release the full potency of divinity on earth through a tranquil mind, through a still heart. When the mind and heart start to get upset about things, then tranquility is lost, and the means to be in the place of tranquility starts to be sought again. All too often, people look at changing their environment when they don't feel tranquil. Maybe a change of circumstance or situation. But the tranquility to start with needs to be about being here in tranquility all the time, no matter what's going on, no matter who one's with, because who one's with and what's going on will change. Those are outer circumstances. But one can't get away from the inner tranquility or lack of tranquility. The tranquil mind is the key, because the tranquil mind leads to a tranquil heart. Therefore, when the mind becomes still, it becomes tranquil. When it doesn't have anything to be upset or concerned about, then it becomes still. When it becomes still, then the communication can proceed clearly from heaven into earth, from the divine mind, the superconscious mind, And there can be a rising up into living from the perspective of the divine mind. It's very different than living from the human mind. There are strata to go through, like pools of water overlapping each other. At a lower level of consciousness, people are caught up in all the things of day-to-day life. But presumably by now we're released ourselves from living in those places and mastered to some extent not going into them anymore. Then comes the next step, the full acceptance of the reality that there is a divine mind. The divine mind always is. But the human mind, to a large extent, hadn't been aware of it until it came to the point of tranquility. So the divine mind has been waiting there for the tranquil state of consciousness to come forth. Once tranquility enters, then the buoyancy of the mind can be lifted up again to a different level. And this is not fully divine mind yet, but an intermediate layer, where at least the conscious mind is aware that there could be the possibility of realizing oneness with the divine mind. And in that, it starts to make a shift from identifying with human mind to identifying with divine mind, from speaking through human consciousness to speaking through more of an awareness of something much larger. There is no arrogance in that state. There's just an awareness of that which has always been underlying human consciousness. There is divinity here on earth. The acceptance of this divinity is the acceptance of the realization that each one, you are divine. And in that strata of moving to the place of accepting your own divinity, you start to become aware of the larger pattern of divinity on the planet, the God system on earth. Earth has a God system, just as much as the planets have a God system and the stars, just as much as every other form, from the smallest microcosmic world to the largest thing we can envision in creation. It all has a God system. In God systems there is a radiant point, much like the sun. There's a point of radiation which sends out and radiates out invisible rays. So also with the God system on earth. There are invisible rays that radiate out from all those who are aware and identifying with being part of the God system on earth. Invisible rays of light, invisible rays of radiation, which encompass much more than just light. They encompass what we conceive of as love and truth and life and purity and much more. These are all invisible rays that emanate through the God system. The God system always was in charge of earth. Without the God system on earth, nothing can occur on earth. This planet is made with a very particular God system. And that God system is God for the planet. It's God for all of creation of this planet. It's God for every single aspect, responsible for every single part of creation here, including the world of mankind. The God system has ultimate power over all of it. In the world of mankind, there's not an awareness that there's a God system. There's not even an awareness that God is here, present, and that this God system of co-creators is here on earth, always looking after things, always setting things right that mankind messes up. So man looks for something outside, maybe beings from other planets, maybe beings from other star systems. And while there certainly are beings from other planets and other star systems, the responsibility for this planet, in this particular star system, is the responsibility that was given by the larger God system to the divine co-creators of this particular God system on Earth. Of course, everybody is part and parcel, really in truth, part of the God system on Earth, except those who aren't aware of it, don't participate consciously. Their God being, their divine being, is continually participating in the God system, continually participating in the co-creative endeavor of life day after day here. The human being may not be aware at all about what's going on other than its own individual life. It doesn't see the larger pattern of the God system, the co-creative family of God beings that are here. So it ignores it. That we've been so in a world of identity with the human, that identity with the human had to reach a point where it was intolerable, where the individual human consciousness would let go to something larger. This usually only happens in times of crisis. For most people, the crisis comes with death or some sort of disease, some sort of personal, inner or outer crisis point. And in those moments, there is the awareness that there must be something more. The mind and the heart conceive of there being truly an opportunity to reach the something more, communicate with the something more, because it longs to. The longing in the heart and the mind is to reach that, to understand that, to communicate with that which it conceives of as God. So it starts about the process of everything it can do to try to achieve oneness with God. And it goes through a bunch of hoops and whistles and tries to do this and that to see if it can find the way. And in the end, it ends up giving up. It ends up realizing that everything that it tried was futile. It cannot achieve that which is sought from that level. The only thing it can do is let go and be tranquil. There becomes an awareness in the mind that when it's tranquil, something else starts to work out. An energy system. We call it a vibrational system. But the tranquil mind gets to participate in the awareness of this vibration. And as it becomes more attuned to how it can enhance the vibration by staying tranquil, it decides it's worth a try. So it starts to play its part. In that way, becoming the Christed mind, playing its part in revealing the Christ conscious mind or the Buddha conscious mind. The words themselves aren't as relevant because it's all, whether we call it the Christ conscious mind or the Buddha conscious mind or the Krishna conscious mind or any of a number of other names for it. It's all the divine consciousness. It's all the co-creator, family of co-creator beings who are here, who are participating in that. And that includes everyone on earth. So the mind starts to become cognizant of the fact that there's something much more. And as it comes to the point of the higher strata, it starts to realize a very simple truth, which has eluded it for the whole life. And the truth comes to this awareness: I am that. When the mind realizes the complex nature of all it's been doing and finally realizes that I am that, it's one. It starts to participate with the heart and what we term human ego in being part of the conscious part of what humanity can play. humanity can play a part consciously in revealing the one I am. And the tranquility is the key component. Be still and know that I'm God. It permeates all of creation. The message is there in all of the substance of nature. So people tend to go out in nature and they start to feel that stillness a little. And they think they're worshipping nature, or they think they should worship nature. But it's much more than nature. Underlying everything is the spirit of the co-creators, the spirit of God, the spirit of the God beings. Because the God system isn't just one God. In the supreme nature of it, yes, there is one God, the supreme one. But in another differentiated world that we participate in the world of heaven and earth that we are given to participate in, there are many gods and many goddesses, including all people on earth are gods and goddesses on this earthly level. This planet is our God system, given to us by the Creator of all things, to do something with, to create life, to radiate blessing into the universe through. So we're here consciously, life after life, coming through consciously into the world, always with the intent of bringing the human consciousness back to the point of realization. And the human consciousness seeking God somewhere else doesn't realize I am that. But when the human consciousness comes to tranquility and then subsequently realizes I am that, then it all starts to make sense. Everything it's been participating in starts to dawn on itself that it's had a very particular role in co-creating. So the responsibility comes back into not only am I and that, but I create all the things going on in my world. Create the inner reality and I create the outer reality. Now the mind doesn't necessarily say this, but it knows to a large extent that cause and effect of creation are what it's been participating in. It's been putting the responsibility for creation into some invisible realm, some God somewhere, maybe a genie in the bottle. And it hasn't taken the responsibility to realize the level of tranquility that's possible, and subsequently the realization I am that. And so it has ignored the fact that it creates the world. It participates with the inner God being in creating whatever confusion there is in the world. Whatever there is in the world is not only individual confusion, but collective confusion. There's nothing we can look out at and say we're not responsible for. We're each given full responsibility over our creation. But human nature obviously doesn't take the responsibility because it's not aware. It completely lacks awareness. It's like a whole different place. So it plays all sorts of little games of illusion. The game of illusion of someone else is to blame for what's going on to me. Or the game of illusion of look what's happening to me. Why is this happening to me thing? All sorts of mentalities of the victim's state of consciousness, ignoring the fact that it's participating in creating to some extent, through awareness or lack of awareness, the environment and the world that it lives in. When one becomes tranquil, when the mind and the heart become tranquil and still, and the awareness dawns on it that I am that, and I create my environment. There's something that I'm doing that is participating with the divine being in creating the outer manifest reality that I see, then only does the mind start to accept and take more responsibility for what it puts out, what it asks for. Because everything is continually a means of asking the inner being, the divine being. The human tranquil mind, through the tranquil sense of consciousness, can ask the divine being for anything it wants, and the divine being sets about to create it. But this also happens for the troubled mind. The troubled mind asks for things, and it gets what it asks for. The troubled circumstances on earth are achieved and realized because the divine power is always working through human consciousness. So we have a messed up world from a divine state. If we look at the world, it's quite messed up, not because of divinity, but because of divinity's inability to act through the untranquil mind of human consciousness. So the divinity needs human consciousness. It requires a tranquil mind. It requires tranquil people, where the mind can be still, and then divinity, individually and collectively, can operate through the tranquil consciousness and create the state of consciousness and the environment around in a much more tranquil way, in a less distorted pattern. This is where we're heading to. A creation of a new pattern by the divine side of consciousness, by the collective side of divinity here on earth. Divine consciousness, 7 billion co-creators, co-creating a new reality. This, of course, is happening, and as it's pushing to the surface, the other extreme starts to show up too. All the resistance patterns to this occurring. And the sense of terror that mankind feels from the awareness that there is actually God and a God system that's operating here. Deep down, man has always known this and is afraid, deadly afraid of what God will do, what the God beings will do. Because the end of mankind's world of all the mixed up things happens, and man's mind no longer has the power to stop it. So man's afraid. Humankind are deadly afraid of the end of its creation. It tries everything in its power to not only patch up its creation, but to try to enforce the creation on others. We have a world that's set out to force creation into the way that it sees. Particular minds gain power in the world, thinking that they have more power because they can enforce their will of creation through force on other people. By war, by force. But of course, as the divine beings start to be able to come through consciously into the mind and the heart, and subsequently into the environment, the balance gets changed. We're here to change the balance of consciousness on earth. Because by being here, we start to release an awareness, our own awareness, our collective awareness of a collective pattern of co-creators here. And that goes into the world to other people. Whether they're participating with us consciously or not, it makes no difference. That's why we don't need to be generating members somehow. Because the communication already is happening, divine to divine, on all and for all the divine beings on earth. So there's no desire to get more membership in that way. The membership's already complete. There's 7 billion divine beings here on earth. It's a lot of divinity being revealed. It's a lot of power of the divine family of God beings here on earth. More than enough power to change the whole planet. So we're participating consciously week after week in our time together to allow the realization of our own hearts and minds to move through the rest of the strata of mankind's mind and heart. Because once your mind, once everyone's mind and heart becomes tranquil and still, then the communication can move through to other minds, through other hearts. Initially, other minds and hearts will do one of two things. Either they'll accept that there's something else happening, or it'll feel the pressure of that something else happening. So those around you may feel some sort of pressure from you, without understanding fully what they feel, because it'll be obviously to them subconscious. Nevertheless, by staying in the place of your own realization of I am that, and identifying with that, identifying with the Christ consciousness for yourself, that brings up pressure for others around you, subconsciously, without you even having to say a word. Because everything you're then revealing is part of the collective divine consciousness here on earth. And so the whole pressure pattern starts to be brought into awareness of individuals around you. When they resonate, when they're moving with you in certain ways, they can feel something. And that something is themselves being lifted up. And as long as they feel lifted up, they start to move into a pattern of being in the God system, or moving to awareness of the God system. But when there's a rejection of it, then they in fact become the part of the opposition towards the God system. There's no point trying to convert anyone, there's no point trying to explain it to anybody, absolutely no point. They either feel resonant and harmonious with it, with the God system, with the fact that something is challenging them to reveal the tranquility in their heart, or they stay in upset, because people love to stay out of tranquility. They love to stay out of the stillness, because when they're out of tranquility and out of stillness, then they can act like any other childish mind out there. The pressure we bring into the world is the pressure of stillness and tranquility, without having to say anything, without having to realize anything. Because as we bring stillness into the world, then stillness greets other people. Stillness is the key component. Through stillness, everything starts to come into an order of stillness. And the phrase, "Be still and know that I am God," is much more than just an awareness of stillness. It's an awareness that through the stillness can be perceived the truth of God. Not just a belief, but the very truth of very God itself. So we stay in a place, day after day, of stillness. Waking up in stillness, realizing that all that we do can be with a stilled mind and a stilled heart. The more the mind and the heart learn how to stay in the place of stillness all the time, then no matter what goes on in the world, no matter what upset, no matter what challenges, they're tons of things that can come up for the mind and the heart. But the mind and the heart then realize that everything is being created by the God system, and there's nothing to worry about then. All it can do, the best thing it can do, is just let go of trying to do anything other than just being still. Because when the mind and heart are still, then God can create something. The God beings, the individual God beings that are on the planet through each one, can reveal the power of God through the still mind and the stilled heart. That's why the saying, be still and know that I am God. Because through stillness comes the power of God into the world. The power of the God beings. So we reveal our full intent as humans by the ability to reach the higher nature, to stand in the place of stillness, to be tranquil and realize something so significant that it doesn't cost any money to realize this. You don't have to buy it, you don't have to do some sort of puja or penance or anything. You don't even have to pray for it. You just have to let go to this stillness. And let go of the addiction to the chaos. When the mind and the heart are in chaos, they love to reveal chaos to other people, and they love to draw the people into the chaos. When some people operate out in the world, they love to stay in chaos. They love to stay in conflict, because then they're not still and they can feel like they're in power somehow. But that's hardly the real sense of power. That only occurs when the mind is still and it lets go and starts to be more buoyant. So it moves into the higher strata of consciousness. A lot of people believe in God, but by living in the lower strata, that belief reveals itself as superstitious belief, fear of God, shame of God, shame for what it's doing or done, or all of these things reveal that the mind and heart truly don't understand God, that they don't choose to be still. The only way of knowing God is through stillness. The only way to know your own God being, the God being that is you, the truth of that is to be still. So the challenge upon mankind isn't one of ending war. It isn't one of stopping starvation. It isn't one of trying to get more members or more people to do the same thing. No. When you, and as each one reveals their stillness, reveals their own sense of awareness of I am that, then that starts to grow in the world. The more there are on earth who reveal that, the more that awareness goes out into consciousness. Because that awareness can travel through and permeate through all of your substance of your consciousness into the very ground that you stand on. The ground that you stand on starts to take on the awareness. The floor, the earth, buried into the earth, into the water, into the magma of the continent, starts to take on an awareness of God. It starts to change. The pattern starts to move. Substance starts to move around according to the God pattern then. So the responsibility is just to be here. Reveal who you truly are, which is a son or daughter of God. And this is the ultimate taking of responsibility again. This is the ultimate awakening again. Awakening to who you are. And taking the responsibility to let your mind and heart be still for yourself. For the revelation, the full revelation of yourself, your true self, your divine self. And things will change in the outer pattern. Nothing in the outer pattern can last very long. Civilizations even don't last very long. We think of some things like Greek civilization, 350 years, or Roman civilization, 450 years, or British civilization, or the French, or the Spanish, or any other civilization, any other empire that seems so great. Even the current empires in the world that seem so great and so powerful that all of mankind thinks, wow, it's so powerful. The United States empire, perhaps, or some other empire. But in fact, we know, and know that we know, how much there is a lack of power, which is why this civilization also will end. There's no way of stopping it from ending. The civilization that is against the very nature of the God system is bound to end. Every creation that goes against the will of the co-creators will pass away. There's no way of stopping it. The God beings are in charge. The co-creators are the co-creators, and that's what makes mankind really fearful. Because deep down it knows that they can only do so much. Not allowed to do anything past what they think they can. So we can see the collapse of civilization. If the identity is tied in with the collapse of civilization, then when it collapses, there will go the identity also. People identify with their bank accounts or their jobs or their politics or their religions, and when those things fall apart, then they feel lost also. But how about not identifying with any of that? How about identifying with the truth of who you really are? You are God. You're a God being. A unique, individualized, divine being. Eternal being, in fact. When that awareness permeates through the mind and the heart, when you've gone through enough of the hoops and whistles of trying to do something that the mind and heart thinks it can do or wants to do to achieve that state, when it realizes that it can't do it, none of the theories, none of the books explain this one thing. All of them are talking about all sorts of patterns of distraction. Aliens and beings from somewhere else are coming to save mankind. From what? Mankind's not able to be saved because mankind's always in the place of passing away. There are no beings coming to save mankind. The beings are here. You are part of the family of 7 billion God beings, co-creators here on earth, who have ultimate responsibility for this planet. There's no one else given the responsibility for it. It's individual responsibility for the individual life that you lead, for the individual world that you live in, and subsequently it's also a collective reality that you're living with other God beings. Your sons and your daughters, your parents, your family, your friends, all God beings. Whether they realize it outwardly or not, it makes no difference. They are still divine beings, incarnate in the human forms that they reveal. And far from needing more people to become aware of this, it's important that the few that hear this message understand it fully and reveal it for themselves. We don't need more membership. Although if there are people that come along that find some resonance and awareness in what we're participating in, it'll only lead to one thing: to them becoming aware of themselves, aware of the God being within. Because we don't have any other agenda. There's nothing else that we're doing this for, other than for the God beings to be able to fully function here on earth through each individual form. So there's no corporate agenda, there's no company this is called, there's no funds we're trying to generate from this. That's all part of the illusory state. The funds are that which allows for the tranquility of mind. Those are funds much more valuable. Tranquil mind has more value than all the funds in the world. It's still hard, because we don't have to get members. How can you try to get a member when all the 7 billion beings are already members of a God system? You can't get them out of the membership. They're already gods and goddesses. They're already divine. They don't need better lives. They don't need better circumstances. What they do need, though, is an awareness of, from the human side of perspective, of the human identity, letting go and becoming aware of the one thing: I am that. I create. And then comes the power revealed on earth. I create a new heaven and a new earth. I create new circumstances and situations. What is the will of God in this day? To create, of course. Always a new heaven and a new earth. A world of peace, a world of tranquility for all people, not just for the Western Hemisphere, the Northern Hemisphere. Not just for the rich, not just for certain segments of society that are Christian or anything else, or claim to be the chosen ones or anything.